Good morning and welcome to Aditya Birla Sun Life AMC's annual investment outlook for 2022. Firstly, a very happy new year to all of you and wish you a prosperous 2022. Every year, this is an event marked in our calendars when we get to meet you all together. And while we intended to do this in person as a precautionary measure, we are doing this digitally again this year. But here's hoping that it would change soon in a few months and when we get to meet in person. We thank you for taking time to join us in this briefing of the outlook for 2022. 2021 was a year of gradual recovery and quite action-packed. Markets reached all-time highs, record number of IPOs, massive vaccination drive, business activities normalizing, among others. 2022 has started with a few factors to watch out for: a new variant, inflationary pressures, and intermittent volatility. In this backdrop, it is a good time to get a sense of what lies ahead for the economy and markets as a result and for the investing community. To throw light on the same, we have our in-house experts who will share the investment outlook for 2022. We are joined by our MD and CEO, Mr. A. Balasubramanian, our Chief Investment Officer, Mr. Mahesh Patil, and our co-heads of fixed income, Ms. Sunaina Dakuna and Mr. Kaustav Gupta. Before we begin, a few points to note. This briefing is in listen-only mode. We will begin with the opening address by our MD and CEO, followed by the presentations from fixed income and then equity. The presentations and summaries have already been emailed to you. Please reach out if you are yet to receive them. After the presentations, we will open for Q&A. Request you to type in your questions on the Outlook in the Q&A section, along with your name, organization, and who the question is for. We will try to answer as many questions possible within the planned timelines. And for the rest, we can always catch up. I will now request Bala sir to make his opening address.
Thanks, Amrita, for setting the ball rolling. Once again, I wish each one of you a happy new year. I'm sure 2022 is going to be a year of joy and happiness and economy coming back in whichever we would like it to be. While Kaustubh and Sunaina would run you through the fixed income outlook, and Mahesh will of course run you through the investment general outlook on both an equity and an overall basis, what our investment team have already rolled out, as we normally do in the beginning of every calendar year as an annual outlook. And I'm also happy to be part of this meeting today because we have been doing this for the last almost 8-9 years, sharing the outlook that we as a fund house make it with all of you the beginning of the year itself, and make this as a more of a knowledge sessions in addition to we express our view that we communicate to you. And therefore, I would encourage each one of you some of the data points, powerful data points that the team will be presenting, which has come on the back of a lot of internal research and external information that is gathered that justifies the outlook that we are giving. Some of them actually you can use it as your data points for your own purpose while doing the analysis and so on and so forth. While they will make the detailed presentations, my own perspective on the year 2022, while of course I just wrote a piece sometime back that the beginning of 2022 would be a year of comeback in many sense, including tourism and the entire the sectors of impacted by the tourism would also come back. That was my opening remark. But of course, Omicron the last few days has been, of course, again creating somewhat of fear among the world. But of course, having said that, clearly the indications are more of symptomatic kind of issues. It's not something serious as we have seen in the first two wave. And definitely, I think probably I always believe that could be a last passing phase, and therefore it is now having an impact on the larger population worldwide. The surge, of course, has been happening quite fast. At the same time, it's also getting cured very fast as it surges. Given the fact, as Amrita mentioned, I think the whole country has gone for the double vaccinations across the world, and the travels now haven't begun in the recent past. I'm sure it's just a question of time for the 2022 come back to normal. But having said that, clearly I think the pandemic years of 2 years, a lot of unprecedented things, or maybe unheard of things, I would say, not unprecedented, I would say a lot of unheard of things, a lot of things that we have never experienced in the past 25 years with respect to whether it's stimulus from fiscal point of view, stimulus from the RBI point of view, or stimulus from the support to the MSMEs point of view, or even the various policy framework which the government has been initiating. And the last 2 years, and my own personal belief is lots have been done to kickstart the, to first support the economy. I think kickstart the economy comes later. To support the economy, to ensure that we remain resilient. At the same time, the economy is get ready actually for next round of growth. Now, the what I believe is the 2 years of steps that has been taken in many areas, as I mentioned. There are a lot of innovation also come during the same period in the policy framework itself. In the RBI policy, they have brought a lot of innovative methodology of ensuring the liquidity is provided on one side. At the same time, liquidity also taken out in a different manner. And many such innovations are coming in the policy framework itself. The same way in the government fiscal side, clearly I think there are innovation has come. At the same time, there is a continuous effort which the government of India has been putting in ensuring more and more compliance happens both in the GST and income tax by view of structural changes that they have brought in. I think all of them actually make me believe that we are getting an economy not just on a high growth path only for the year 2022, even beyond that. My own belief is I think India will get into the 10 years of the high growth economy in the world with high level of economic activities that could come back on the basis of serious commitment that each of the governments are bringing on the table in every possible way to drive back the growth. And second, of course, is the way I think the social benefits have been given and the rural economy, the way has been performing well compared to the urban economy. Clearly, I think the money available in the hands of people have been rising. I think it's just a question of time for that to get converted to the spending, and therefore that probably could also eventually make the economic growth to come back much faster than what you are saying. So on the basis of these assumptions, clearly I think the global economy is of course is also on the path of recovery. It has gone through some of the ups and downs. The very fact that we are seeing increased level of price increase in the global market itself indicates it's coming on the back of one, there is renewed expenditures happening from the world economy to drive the economic growth. And second, clearly from the domestic, the price movement point of view, also supply demand constraint which used to be there more in the form of supply and less in the form of demand. All these things are getting contracted thanks to the China factor being there. Clearly, we are probably seeing next round of growth coming back, even the global market. I think one of the factors I think remains, in my own belief, is the way I think India has shown its resilience in the whole period of 2 years, both on the managing COVID-related issues, health-related issues, as well as the policy framework. Probably, I would assume India would probably be positioned as one of the best decision that has been taken in the last 2 years, the global map. The very fact that the recent discussion that has happened in the case of digital, India, I think Aadhaar is now become the role model to be implemented in the global, some of the countries. All these things, I think, puts India in a map that being seen as something, it's a new India with more and more startups coming in and hitting the capital market, and more risk appetite towards investing in equity has been rising. And that's something historically I have not seen in the last number of years. All those things, in my own belief, is making me believe that we will probably be one of the country would actually remain the most attractive destination for foreign investors to put money in India. I think more than FII flows, the FDI flows will continue to remain significant. As I given my own note, that each year the FDI flows have been rising compared to the previous years. Probably the next few years, the FDI flows in the country will continue to remain a very stronger growth. On this basis, I believe that India is not just getting into 1 year of recovery path. I think my own belief is we are now getting into the next decade of bull economy and would now be the global market will start looking at India as one of the most attractive investment destination. From Indian point of view, the savers habit is changing, risk appetite coming back. I think more and more money, I think, would come to the capital market, both through the mutual funds as well as the direct equity. And that also, I think, will be one of the trends that I see it. Third, of course, is from employment to the entrepreneurship kind of model. I think increasingly, the new age, the Gen Z are now more keen on becoming an entrepreneur rather than the employment seeking opportunity that I think India generally used to. There's also change in the culture. If you look at it on a holistic basis, and also combined with a good political stability, with the reform initiative that they are taking, both at the state level and central level, I believe personally, that we would probably see a 10-year of bull market, both in equity and the economy coming back aggressively, supported with the corporate earnings. I think overall equity market outlook for the next 10 years should remain somewhat bullish. Market, of course, as Amrita mentioned, intermittent volatility is a function of market. As I always believe, when the market rises, there are a set of people who get worried on the various things. If the market falls, there are a set of people who get worried. At the end of the day, from investors' point of view, we have to keep a longer term outlook in mind while building the portfolio and building the asset class that deliver in the long term a stable, substantial return over any other investment opportunity that exists in front of them. I think that will remain key in creating a success. I think every individual in the country, every investor in the country, I think will get an opportunity to actually participate in the high growth economy that I think will be set in for India as a whole. Therefore, the focusing on continuous investments, keeping in mind the longer term outlook, I think keep the success in building the individual portfolio. I think I'll stop here and hand it over to Amrita to run you through the rest of the programs. And of course, I'll be available once the presentations are done by both Kaustubh and Sunana and Mahesh. I'll also join them for Q&A sessions, which you may have, many of you may have questions from your side.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on this. And well, I will now request our co-heads of fixed income, Sunana and Kaustubh, to present the outlook for fixed income for the year 2022. Over to you guys. You both are on mute. So
yeah. Thank you, Amrita. Thank you, Bala sir. Happy New Year, everyone. Let me just start with presentation. I hope my screen is visible now. Okay. So first of all, Happy New Year, everyone, and thanks for coming and giving us an opportunity to be heard. Let me start with a very quick uptake on the annual outlook for macro from fixed income perspective for next year. Before we start debating about 2022, let's have a very quick update on what happened in 2021. Right at the start of last year, global growth was expected to come back very strongly from a prompt and very robust response by policymakers, both from monetary and fiscal front, and expectation of better availability of vaccines. Resultantly, 2021 growth uptick was like a mirror image of 2020. However, growth normalization in 2021 was very diverged, where most of the developed market economies, they were the key torch bearer of growth, led by US, being the clear ahead in terms of growth revival within the developed markets as well. There, as you can see, from the policy perspective, there was a clear divergence between the developed markets and emerging markets. And this, we understand, was a key differentiator in the growth normalization. Large part of fiscal loosening was unleashed by all segments of economy, but as far as the developed markets were concerned, they were the one who were actually spending by way of direct or indirect handouts to the households and the lower segment of the society. As far as emerging markets are concerned, expansionary fiscal was largely on account of shortfall in receipts due to collapse in economic activity. We understand that the money multiplier or the fiscal multiplier of such expansion is somewhat limited, and they tend to wane out quite quickly. Going ahead, both fiscal and monetary accommodation in 2022 will be recalibrated with some consolidation and glide path. This is expected to bring growth run rate down than what we experienced in 2021. Having said that, at least in developed markets, which is specifically G4 countries, household balance sheets, they are in much better shape today, and they are expected to provide some bit of cushion by better consumption. For example, in case of US alone, it is expected that about potential 2.5 trillion of excess savings, they are lying with the households, which is waiting to be deployed. Having said that, inflation has become a problem, and due to the inflation, the real personal incomes of households, they are falling rapidly already. Also, as you can see in this chart, that there is a psychological shift towards higher precautionary savings at margin due to pandemic. About 50% of stimulus check up till now has been used to deleverage rather than spending. So basically, what we can conclude is that households are in much better shape, but willingness from them towards the spending or asking for better leverage is missing. Which is why we think that the household ability to consolidate against the fiscal drag would be somewhat limited. Of late, there are apprehensions on the wage pressures which are building up, specifically in US. Once you dissect the data, as you can see in this chart, over last 3 months, it is largely this wage pressure is on the entry level of segment. Beyond that, the prime wage workers growth, at least the wage growth, they are already stagnant. The key reason for this mismatch has been the labor force participation, where there has been a clear downtick. And once you adjust labor force participation, the actual unemployment level in US is about 7% and not 4%. Thus, we expect US growth to grow around 3.5%, which is somewhat below consensus call than most of the policymakers and the analysts on the street. Coming to China. China has been the largest driver of global growth over last 3 decades, but their growth in last decade slowed to 7% from about 10% in 2000. Policymakers are now targeting about 6% of growth for current decade by clear shifts towards inclusive growth and consumption being the key driver of growth. Last year, export turned out to be the key driver for them. Having said that, credit is already a problem for them, and given that the policymakers, there is a clear choice towards a path of deleveraging, orthodox policy making, and breaking asset bubbles, China could be a drag on global growth, at least in short term. Property accounts for about 25% of Chinese GDP, and housing side deflation is clearly visible. More than 2/3 of Chinese savings lies with property and bank deposits, and thus we see with the shortfall or deflation in the housing prices, this could get into a negative wealth loop. There are consensus view on China with regard to the incremental easing next year. What our bet is that it would be just to provide a flow to growth and support financial stability instead of stimulating growth. So the easing measures will be rolled out in a very gradual and peaceful fashion and as a reactive policy instead of proactive policy, which is why we expect Chinese growth also to track sub 5%, which is what being targeted by the policy makers. Again, from a consensus view, we are somewhat bearish on the Chinese growth for 2022. Beyond US and China, there are other large blocks of the economy which are still struggling and they are below the pre-pandemic trajectory of growth. Given that most of these large blocks, they are quite connected with the Chinese economic activity and with the waning impact of developed market stimulus and also local response quite muted up till now, there is no great reason to believe that the normalization path for 2022 would be meaningful different than what we experienced in 2021, and thus economic growth for the world at large is likely to underwhelm the projections. IMF is projecting about 5.9% of growth for 2022, for 2021 and 4.9% for 2022. We see downside risk to both projections from a global perspective. Coming to inflation. Now, inflation has become a new buzzword in the policy corridor because in 2021, all through year, markets were betting that the inflation will come back, but policymakers were expecting them to be transitory. Having said that, inflation in our take has been on account of demand and supply fractions. The global supply bottlenecks and the pro-inflationary government policies both trigger economic disruptions, and which is why inflation came in a lot more persistent than what policymakers were anticipating for. Having said that, if you look at this chart, one thing which is very clear that within the developed markets, this inflation is largely in those countries which has given very large amount of handouts, and beyond developed markets, basically the fallback in inflation, at least the emerging markets are concerned, is not significantly different from what the central bank targets are. Another notable thing about the inflation is that it's largely in the goods driven, and services as of now, they still continue to struggle. Thus, usually the supply response to goods do come with some time lag, and we hope that in 2022, this transition should take place quite seamlessly. There are early signs already in terms of easing supply side constraints, and which is why we are a lot more tolerant in terms of inflation normalization in calendar year 2022. Good news is that from a long-term perspective, inflation expectations, at least up till now, they are very well anchored. As the recurring large round of fiscal stimulus, which was provided in 2021, will be absent in 2022, we think the demand-supply dynamic, which is somewhat skewed toward demand in calendar year 2021, would balance in 2022. Given inflation is already on higher side, and it has started developing some bit of wings on housing and the labor side, and also because of incremental political pressure, Fed is in some pressure to normalize. Thus, Fed has shifted its focus on inflation, and they have started normalizing by QE tapering and also increasing the pace in the last policy meet. Having said that, one should be cognizant that any abrupt tightening can upset the recovery, which is still uneven, specifically beyond US, and thus policy normalization in our view has to be very gradual. Good news is that markets are already pricing in about 3 rate hikes for 2022. While market thinks Fed will rate hikes thrice in this year, but at the same time, they are also factoring that the terminal rates to be lower than what it used to be pre-pandemic. This shows that the absolute movement, at least from the Fed perspective, is somewhat limited. Our take is that central bankers would be willing to normalize, but only to the extent market and incoming data don't misbehave. Coming to dollar. Now, dollar has been the strong currency in 2021 against the consensus estimates. We think that this strength was largely due to the market positioning, which was at the inception of the year, and due to the better growth surprise that US gave related to the G10 countries and reset of interest rate expectation in the second half by Fed. Going in 2022, we think both growth and interest rate expectations differential in US starts to unwind. Thus, we think DXY not to cross 98 in 2022 in such scenario. As such, hawkish tilts are by these advanced economies are bad news for the emerging markets and their macro policy setup, with currencies being the chief channel of expression. Usually when the advanced economies starts tightening, there are outflows in emerging markets. Fortunately, emerging markets, they are in much better place now than the experience of 2013. Also, they have not got any significant amount of debt flows in last 24 months. Thus, barring few commodity exporter countries, most of the emerging market central bankers, they are struggling on growth for now, and they have already started some bit of calibration in the monetary policy in expectation of normalization by the Fed. On valuation front also, as you can see, currencies are much cheaper, and which is why we think that emerging market currency as a pack will be a lot more stable in 2022. With stable FX and central bank focus on growth, we think that even for 2022, policymakers in these emerging markets should focus more on growth, and the policy support should remain intact like we saw in 2021. Having said that, there would be some bit of tapering as growth becomes more durable on this front. Let me come quickly to India. As such, hawkish tilt given that the emerging market countries are in much better place, and India is doing much better within the emerging market pack. However, the Indian growth is expected to be closer to 9% on back of faster normalization, which we saw post second wave, and also due to the negative base effect of 7% growth last year. If one need to differentiate between, as far as the normalization path is concerned, one need to differentiate between how much of this normalization is associated with the reopening trade, how much it is because of seasonality as we enter into the festive season post second wave, and also how much is a real improvement. If you strip out the base effect, actual growth for this year is somewhat dismissive and about 1 to 2% only instead of 9%. Even for next year, we expect growth rate to be somewhat 9%. This is somewhat higher than the street estimates, but we think that is also because of the base effect and statistical implications. Once you remove the statistical implication, the real growth for the country will be about closer to 4.5% in fiscal year 2022 and 23, and which is somewhat better than FY22, but still lower than the pre-pandemic rate of growth. The key reason for slowdown in momentum is because of absence in fiscal impulse up till now. Most of the fiscal expansion, as you can see, is driven by shortfall in revenue and bookkeeping exercise, and actual fiscal spending is somewhat limited. Having said that, long-term growth in India has been around 6.5% if you look at between 10-year, 15-year and 25 years growth. And most of the drivers, they are still there. However, over last 20 years, the drivers have keep on changing. For example, in 2000 to 2008, exports were the key driver of our growth. And between 2006 and 2012, capex was the key engine of growth. Post 2014, consumption became the key driver and it started growing at about 7%. However, before COVID, it started struggling closer to 5% once the credit conditions become very tight. On a 2-year basis, even today, the consumption is still about 3% and which is what at least dragging growth for now and needs to be looked upon. In our assessment, the key reason why the consumer or consumption segment is struggling are: first, the services sector, which drives the consumption, is still about 9% below the pre-pandemic level. Second, household balance sheets, they are in much weaker shape today, because both from income perspective and flow perspective, from a real perspective, from the real terms, and which is a drag on consumption incrementally. Third, fiscal margin has been dragged for households because of the higher excise duty. Fifth, monetary policy impact has been largely stimulative only for corporate and banking sector, and SMEs and households, they are still in deep pain, as visible in most of the collection data on this front. Also, beyond corporate India, which account for just 5% of total wage force, both nominal and real wage is settling about 2% lower than the pre-pandemic level, and which is why in our assessment, consumption is a drag and needs to be at least needs to be pulled upon for a better growth days ahead. Capex, there is a consensus view that Capex is the key thing which will need to be watched out for. In our assessment, there are enabling conditions or rather structural changes that government has done in form of negative real rates, higher liquidity, clarity on policy making, stronger and cleaner banking and borrower balance sheet, lower corporate taxes, and PLIs incentives like PLI schemes, just to state some. But agents are not willing to lever up. Now, Capex starts contributing growth in immediate terms only when agents are willing to lever up because of operating and financial multiplier that we get. There is some inertia on this count, and in our assessment, that need to be addressed at least in immediate terms for Capex to start picking up. Now, why we think that the Capex or at least the willingness is missing from the borrower perspective is because of twofold. First, as far as the capacity utilization are concerned, they are still lesser than 70%, which is generally the global benchmark for the Capex cycle to start pulling up. As you can see in this number, beyond commodity companies and telecom companies, which are because of the base effect, the 2-year CAGR of EBITDA growth is somewhat lower than what it used to be pre-pandemic. So one can conclude that at least up till now, large portion of these corporate profitability is driven by price effect rather than volume effect, and that needs to be pulled upon. The second important reason is because of the tighter credit conditions. It's true that a lot of policy measures has been done to stimulate credit by structurally keeping rates low. But at the same time, there are credit conditions, at least in our understanding, they are much tighter today than any time in last 10 to 15 years. We think that the impact of such much less appreciated. For example, over last 5 years, from a borrower perspective, there has been laws like IBCs and their experience of credit in 2008, which has made them risk averse. On the lender side as well, there are various risk mitigants policies which has been introduced by various policymakers and regulators. Although these regulations, they do a very good job in binding the risk and financial stability in medium term, in short term, they generally tend to bring down growth and tighter the credit conditions and margin. And which is why in our view, from a lender perspective and borrower perspective, there are better abilities in terms of funding this Capex cycle, but the willingness at margin is missing. Coming to inflation, like most of the emerging markets, deviation from the pre-pandemic run rate of inflation in India is somewhat limited. Last entire year, inflation trended around 5.5%, and which was within the glide path. Core numbers of late, they have started trending closer to 6%, but as our view on the global inflation plays out, we think these numbers can turn around and they can settle more like 5.5 for next year. Given that our growth is weak, for this year and somewhat weaker next year also from a pre-pandemic level, we expect next year inflation to range between 5 to 5.25, and this is within the RBI estimates. As far as risk to inflation is concerned, we think oil prices, they continue to be the biggest risk. As such, oil bill impact on overall GDP has come off, but given any sudden surprise in oil price and given that the oil runs through all economic activity, it poses a significant risk for our financial stability and beyond inflation, and we need to be watchful on this front. As far as fiscal part is concerned, for upcoming year, we expect central to print fiscal closer to 6% and state to print fiscal closer to 2.8%, which is lower than FY22. However, because of the high maturities in FY23, the gross borrowings will be somewhat same. And this, given that the credit growth is likely to pick up and lower inclination by RBI to do OMO, can put some pressure on the long-term term premiums. On trade front, in FY22, we expect CAD to be about 1.9%, and next year we expect CAD run rate to be more like between 2.25 to 2.5%. In these calculations, we have assumed crude to trade on an average between $80 to $85. However, our overall range of crude is between 65 to 85 for calendar year 2022. Despite running higher CAD than this year, we expect rupee to depreciate very gradually. And the reason is because of high level of reserves, expectation of stable oil, and better prepared emerging market currencies, and our biasness towards depreciating DXY, which is good for emerging market as a pack whole. Also, as you can see in this chart, INR is not expensive by any means than what we have experienced in last 5 to 10 years. Coming to RBI, rightfully RBI has used flexibility part of its flexible inflation framework. Given that the deviation of growth run rate is significantly more than the deviation of inflation run rate compared to the pre-pandemic level, inflation should continue to attract lesser policy focus for now. We understand that the financial stability and growth will drive policy consideration over inflation even in 2022. Trade numbers will drive financial stability, and local consumption and potential new capex cycle will drive any handle on local growth. Since uncertainties around growth are much more than the inflation, policy normalization has to be calibrated and well telegraphed like we saw in 2021. Having said that, quantum of liquidity is very large and liquidity normalization needs to take place on this front, at least for now. RBI has started on it. RBI balance sheets have already peaked in mid of October, and they have announced liquidity normalization by using VRRR. We see as RBI focus moved from overnight repo to 14-day VRRR, call money states start stabilizing more like 375 from the next fortnight onwards. We also expect RBI to start normalization of liquidity corridor in 2 steps starting from February policy. On markets, soft curves for now, they are pricing very steep rate hikes, and they are expecting about 145 basis of rate hike over the course of next 12 months on operative rate. Of this 145 basis point, about 45 to 50 basis point is on account of liquidity normalization, and rest is on account of repo rate normalization. Thus, markets are expecting 3 repo rate hikes in calendar year 2022. We expect at max 2 rate hikes by end of 2022. Also, by end of 2022, we expect operative rate to be more like 4.5 instead of 5%, which is being priced in by the markets. Another reason why we think that RBI will be a lot more telegraphed and tolerant this time is because large part of bank loan is already now shifted to market-linked benchmarks. As you can see in this graph, with a higher number of loans getting linked to market rates, the policy transmission in this cycle has to be much faster. As market link rates are already moved up by 50 basis point, it is inappropriate to say that RBI is behind the curve and there is no tightening in the system up till now. Let me summarize as far as the fixed income outlook is concerned. Given there is no denial that interest rates have bottomed out, and market, and more important, the policy makers, they are looking for opportunities to normalize rates from lower bounds. Having said that, this normalization process is likely to induce significantly more walls than compared to last year. But the real question in the policy corridor, at least in our understanding, will be about the pace of normalization and how far are we from the terminal rates. Given that curves are steep, these steep curves, they do provide roll down benefits for our investors. Markets are pricing very aggressive rate hikes, and there are demand supply dynamics which is stressed out in the longer end of the curve. Thus, from a balance of risk argument perspective, we think shorter end may continue to be a better play, like it played out in 2021. Thus, unless policymakers end up hiking rates more aggressively than what is priced in by the markets, these curves will be a better play, and within the RBI guidance of gradual normalization, yield maximization can continue to be a better strategy for fixed income, at least for this year. From investor perspective, risk averse investors, what we are communicating to them is to look to invest in money markets and ultra short-term funds and low duration funds until more clarity on growth emerges. An investor with a long-term time frame, they can continue to look upon passive strategies and short-term fund. And the longer term time frame I would like to define is between 1 to 3 years. Let me share a few thoughts on the risk as well to the entire macroeconomic framework that we are projecting. Apart from the sudden energy prices and geopolitical misadventure, given the kind of neighbors that we have, any sudden shift in stance by advanced economy central bankers is key risk to our growth inflation framework. As far as COVID is concerned, world is much better prepared today to deal with COVID, and at least from an infrastructure perspective, we are far ahead of COVID this time. As far as virus is concerned, our understanding is that most of the pathogens are less lethal over time, but they could be more infectious, as we can see in case of Omicron. Thus, for now, unless the infrastructure is overwhelmed, COVID is turning to be an endemic stage for now. Unless you start seeing number of deaths starts getting higher than what the global experience has been, and which could in turn have some bit of political ramification, we see RBI to continue to support for next year. Thank you. Let me pass on to Sunaina. Sunaina.
Thank you so much, Kaustubh. Good morning to everybody. I'm going to take the credit outlook in two parts. The first, I will briefly talk about the overall credit environment and the credit health in corporate India. And secondly, I'll take you into our view on individual sectors. A more detailed view you will find as part of the presentation of your president. Thank you. So corporate health in India is faring much better. When we talk about corporate India, this is the organized listed space that we're talking about. Companies last year took a lot of advantage of the accommodative policies of RBI, the large amount of liquidity and low interest rates available in the system. And they used this to ensure that they raised large amounts of debt at much lower costs and replaced their high cost debt with low cost debt. Additionally, using buoyant equity markets, they managed to raise a fair amount of equity and thereby delever their balance sheets. If we look at these charts are based on data that RBI puts out in about 2,700 odd non-government, non-financial companies. And it shows that on both matrices, both on in terms of debt servicing, which would be the left-hand chart talking about interest cover, as well as in terms of profitability ratios, corporate India seems to be doing better today than it was even pre-pandemic. And this also we see in terms of rating upgrades. CRISIL ratings in their publication that came out for the 30th of September, H1 FY 2022, actually said that their credit ratio, which is the ratio of upgrades to downgrades, jumped to about 2.96 times. This figure was sub 0.5 same time last year. Next slide, please. The financial sector actually is picking up again after the second wave of COVID. So post June 2021, we've actually seen collection efficiencies pick up. However, it's to be noted that the collection efficiencies have now seemingly stagnated at around about 100%, which indicates that while collections are much improved, collection of overdues is still some time away. Within the financial sector, there are two sub-segments, which is that of microfinance and MSME financing, which seem to have undergone some amount of permanent scarring. And recovery in these sectors is likely to be delayed. In the infrastructure sector, we see in power the power demand rebounding, and the base power will come from increased power generation by the thermal power generators. And we expect PLFs to go up. Merchant prices, however, will moderate in line with the softening coal prices as increased availability is there for coal. There's a large emphasis on renewables world over, and India is no different. We've also set for ourselves a fairly stiff target to increase our renewable capacity, as well as to ensure that by 2030, the overall generation share of renewables would move to 50%, which is currently at around about 20%. We believe that solar power will have the edge over wind generation, primarily because of two reasons. One is less PLF variability seen in solar power generation, and secondly is less volatility in payment profile of state discoms when it comes to solar power payments. However, discom receivables have started inching up, despite the large fall that we saw after the relief provided in the Atmanirbhar package. So this will continue to be a drag on the sector. Moving to the next sector within infrastructure, in roads, this is one sector that has been quite badly impacted. And we can see it in terms of the toll collections volatility over the last 2 years. And that's primarily because in the initial lockdown, tolls were suspended. And then, of course, in the second wave of COVID, there was a lot of restrictions, a lot of intrastate restrictions. However, now things seem to have stabilized and come back on track, and we can see that both in terms of average daily collections as well as in terms of the e-way billing. Just hoping that Omicron does not put a spoke in the recovery of this sector. Intensity of bidding has also gone up over the last few months, and we've seen this primarily in bidding for both the hybrid annuity model projects as well as for normal EPC contracts. And this is primarily on the back of the deleveraging done by the few remaining players in the sector. They've delevered by selling off their assets to various InvITs, various other platforms, because previously they were very highly levered and had a large amount of debt on the balance sheets. The telecom sector will actually see their industry revenue grow by about 15%, despite wireless subscriber levels remaining stagnant. This growth will be on account of improved ARPUs due to the tariff rate hikes taken by the remaining players in this sector, and also on the back of higher data consumption. The telecom package that was announced by the government will also ease the burden on telecom companies and ease their cash flows with all the various announcements that were made. In conclusion, we believe that the infrastructure sector is likely to see a renewed thrust, particularly with the government rolling out its monetization plan. There is going to be a large amount of monetization of assets like roads, transmission assets, airport assets, ports, etc. And already there are ways and means by which a government has already experimented very successfully with monetizing these assets. For all the other assets, however, we believe that there would require to be some amount of tweaks that are made in the existing concession agreements to ensure that there is a fair amount of enforceability of contracts. Moving now to metals, we believe that in steel, China actually led the first phase of recovery. But going ahead, any improvement in recovery would now depend on the rest of the world, considering that a large part of demand in China is coming from the property sector, which is stressed. In India, the spread of Indian primary steel producers is expected to moderate, though not to such a great extent, because raw material prices are also moderating lower. Most of the large Indian steel players have announced large capex plans. This is on the back of their strong deleveraging that they have done over the last 2 years. However, this capex cycle is likely to be different from the previous one because majority of the capex will be brownfield, which is cheaper than greenfield capex. And as announced, most of the capex is likely to be funded internally. In the non-ferrous space, we expect aluminum prices will remain high due to the green cycle and ESG demand. However, zinc prices are expected to moderate from their current levels due to the supply-demand dynamics. In the real estate residential sector, this is one sector that is actually seeing an upcycle after a long period of time. Volumes have picked up. However, average prices have continued to remain rather stagnant. We have seen a shift in market share from the unorganized and small players to the large and organized players, and we expect this to continue going forward. In the commercial real estate space, we've actually, after a fair amount of buzz about work from home and various different hybrid models, we've now begun to see some signs of revival. And we believe that the large grade A properties will continue to be able to command not only their premiums, but also will see increased absorption, considering that their target clients are hiring rather incrementally and rather rapidly. In the automobile sector, while we're seeing passenger vehicles in the last 2 years having seen some amount of recovery and good robust demand, when you actually compare it versus 2019 pre-pandemic, you can see that we're still some way away. Supply side issues will continue due to shortage of semiconductor chips. But however, commercial vehicles and two-wheelers, they're witnessing tepid to negative growth, and that will continue until such time as we see a recovery in the economy. Now, I'll just touch very briefly on credit spreads. And the charts that we've put out are for the 2-year AA rated credit spreads. After the spreads actually peaked last year at the height of the crisis in April, May 2020, we've seen that the spreads have come off, fallen quite rapidly, and now remain at rather low levels. This is on account of a couple of reasons. The first is the huge amount of surplus liquidity that is in the system, and that has driven the spreads lower and have kept them there. And secondly, and more importantly, also the fact that companies have delevered their balance sheets, and whatever capex they plan to do, they're using their internal accruals. So as a result, the demand for new issuances is much less than what we've seen in the past. In summary, well, when we're looking at fixed income, we believe that going ahead, world growth has a far amount of headwinds in 2022 as stimulus fades. However, India is much better placed, and our growth prospects will be much better due to all the various structural changes and reforms that have been carried out, including the reduction in corporate tax rate, as well as PLIs and so many other measures. But the near-term growth will actually be driven more by how consumption picks up and as and when capex picks up. And I think these two might continue to be a drag in the immediate near term going forward. We believe that policy will continue to remain accommodative, similar to how it was in 2021. While normalization has started already, there will be a fair amount of volatility. The key two questions of 2022, which will drive rates, is not when will normalization process begin, but more importantly, the pace of normalization, and where will the terminal rate actually finally end up at. We believe RBI will be more focused on growth rather than inflation, unless there is any disturbance in financial stability emanating from the external sector, and till such time as they are able to cite durable growth. Because as previously said, consumption and capex are yet to pick up. Going ahead for fixed income, we believe that the strategy will be that of yield maximization. Aggressive rate hikes are already priced into the very steep yield curves that we have, and carry will compensate for any potential duration loss that may come as a result of normalization. And from a credit perspective, while fundamentally credit health is extremely good, and corporate India is in an extremely good position credit worthiness wise, spreads are extremely expensive, and as a result, we would prefer to limit ourselves to maybe up to about 2 years in terms of credit defaults. Thank you so much. With that, I hand over back to Amrita.
Thank you so much, Kaustav and Sunaina, for this very insightful presentation. Now we have our Chief Investment Officer, Mr. Mahesh Patil, who will take us through the equity outlook for 2022. Over to you, Mahesh.
Yeah. Thanks, Amrita, and welcome everyone, and wish you all a very happy 2022. So, Kaustubh and Surena have given you a very good outlook on the macro front. So I'll take it up from there in terms of our equity outlook. Let me just share the presentation. Yeah, can you see it?
Yes,
so, yeah, so as we talk about, the title of the presentation is Continue the Road of Recovery, because we think that overall Indian economy is on a pace of growth, okay, where we are seeing that the recovery phase is pretty much on way. And not only that, India is now at a cusp of a new economic cycle. I mean, we had challenges in the last 2-3 years, okay, we have seen India's overall growth has been impacted because of various factors, but I think that is likely to change, though not immediately in the next 1 or 2 years, but if I take a next 3 to 5 year view, I think clearly, I think this is a new economic cycle for India. But just to look at things slightly in perspective in terms of 2021, how it was. So 2021 was in a way a risk-on rally, what we saw in the market, right? Because of the large amount of fiscal stimulus, easy money and liquidity, all risk assets were up. And it was a kind of a one-way journey, really without much of a correction. Though we saw some volatility come in the latter part of the calendar year, but overall markets did very well. US market was the best performing market again, on the back of very strong growth in the US economy as well as corporate earnings growth. But India also was one of the other better performing markets in the last calendar year. And if you look at the sectors, okay, which did well was mainly the cyclicals, right, which are the non-defensives, which really rallied because they were the sectors which were also depressed. Most of the valuation sectors were lower. And also the earnings rebound in some of these sectors, whether it is metals, whether it is the consumer durables, real estate was also fairly strong. I mean, IT was the only sector defensive which did well because IT is also to a way linked to the global economy, which also did very well. And the breadth of the market improved. That's what we had been saying last time also, that the breadth, last year we said we look forward that the breadth will improve as we see more sectors participating. And if you look at the small cap and mid cap indices, they did the best. They were also depressed earlier, and the returns, they were almost double the Nifty returns. But while the markets continue to move higher and earnings growth was also kind of catching up, but the because of the easy liquidity conditions and low interest rates, we've seen that the valuations continue to remain elevated across the region globally. So if you compare the valuation across the key geographies in terms of the P multiple, the premium to the long-term averages was anywhere between 15 to around 35%. In the US has been the most expensive market, again, driven by the large rally we saw in the technology stocks over the years. But clearly the markets continue to remain at elevated valuations. And I think that is something which probably will change in this calendar year, where we see some kind of a moderation valuation as we see a transition, okay, from a high liquidity scenario to a kind of a moderate liquidity scenario. We'll talk about that in the coming presentation. So how do we look forward 2022 on this backdrop? So we think the global markets are climbing the wall of worries, despite the headwinds what we saw last year because of supply side bottlenecks and the supply side shocks, and some kind of intermittent disruptions because of the COVID wave. The market, global economy was very strong last year. Next year, while it will slow down, it will still remain fairly decent. Though US growth will be the strongest, is what we are looking at. And overall, I think China is where the growth will slightly remain muted, but China would still be around 5% or so. And India would still probably be one of the fastest growing economies, is what it looks like. US, while we've seen that the growth this calendar year will slow down, but US still remains fundamentally very strong because if you look at the consumer fundamentals are very robust this time. The household balance sheets have been the strongest ever. And we've seen that the overall savings, right, typically middle income household savings in cash after tax, which typically used to be around 3 weeks, is now up to 3 months. So all these excess savings which are there, which are likely to continue to drive consumption, even that's why we've seen while the inflation has been higher, consumption hasn't really eased off. And that would, while interest rates will go up, but consumption should remain fairly strong. And in the US, we're seeing for the first time, we're seeing that the overall investment cycle in US is looking much better. Government is also going ahead with its infrastructure push, and capacity utilization levels have really bounced back well. So US should be fairly steady amongst the developed markets. And while inflation has been a cause of concern and has been at a 30-year high, but I think the factors, which are supply side challenges which were driving that, are likely to ease off going forward. And overall commodity prices also on the higher base should normalize. So we should see inflation again coming down to compared to the Fed target zone sometime in the latter part of this calendar year. And the overall Fed has already announced a tapering, and the pace of tapering is now around $30 billion per month. And while that will mean that the overall liquidity will probably kind of be much lower than what it is, but it is still quite some time, and not only 2023 when we actually see the Fed balance sheet kind of shrinking. So overall liquidity, while it will be lower than what it was last year, it will still be fairly reasonable high even in this calendar year for markets for risk appetite to remain fairly good. And overall, as Kaustubh also talked about, we are looking at Fed to increase interest rates. Expectation is around 3 rate hikes in this calendar year, and followed by another 3 rate hikes next year. But again, this will just be a normalization rate. I think that should not really impact the longer term rates is what the view is. And despite that, I think the overall the rates, the real rates will still remain negative, and that would still be positive, for risk appetite going forward. China remains a cause of concern. We've seen economic growth has slowed down materially over there. We've seen the property sector in China has got impacted severely. And if you look at in the earlier years, the big driver for China growth was investments. And that has now come down as China is now trying to move from an investment-led economy to a consumption-led growth, and also moving towards supporting the other high growth sectors, right? Like the green tech, biotechnology. And as a result of this transition, China will continue to probably meander around, say, sub 5% kind of a growth rate. But we don't see it going down dramatically because the Chinese government is likely to support and take corrective measures, if they see the growth slowing down. So that's not too bad. I mean, there was a fear that Chinese growth will probably slow down significantly because of the property crisis. But I think that at the moment looks to be fairly contained. Overall, if you look at the emerging markets as a basket, has seen the growth differential between the developed markets and emerging markets, which peaked out in 2008-9, has been coming down. So emerging market growth has been slower, and it doesn't look like it will really go up materially on the backdrop now when we are seeing that the overall interest rates are going up, and US dollar, at least in the initial period, should show some sign of strength. So emerging market growth would be slightly weaker, though I think the central banks, as Kaustubh mentioned, they already started tightening. So we don't see any further big tightening happening in emerging markets. But within the emerging markets, I think China and India have the best external debt position, right? And should see a relatively superior growth. The COVID cases, I mean, we've seen the COVID again cases have shot up, but looking at the pace of vaccination which has happened, and the fact that the new variant, okay, Omicron, is not likely to be as potent, we don't see any major impact on the economic growth rate and on the lockdown. And I think the world has now come to deal with, I think, any kind of surge in virus cases. And there is clearly a path, okay, which is there in terms of how to really manage this. So we don't see that really posing a big challenge in terms of growth in this calendar year. India also, we are currently in the midst of the third wave of COVID, and you will see the number of cases going up rapidly in the next few weeks. But the good news is that the overall hospitalization rate is much lower, and as a result of that, I think don't see any major impact of the reaction by the government in terms of imposing any lockdown. And the market also is trying to kind of ignore that. And overall recovery has been fairly strong in the last few months. We have seen, though India has been slightly behind the curve in terms of recovery compared to the global recovery, but things have been picking up. And as you can see, the GST collections have been clocking up more than 1.3 lakhs. The total collections have also been fairly strong. The mobility indicators are also showing a quick recovery, though consumption is still slightly weak, rural consumption. But as the mobility picks up, we should see that also improving. And I think we remain fairly constructive on India's GDP growth going forward, though it will take some time to pick up. But I think India is on its path towards a kind of a long-term growth rate, which is 6.5%. And we see that trend line growth kind of meeting that in the next 2 years. And what is going to support that is going to be all the three pillars of GDP, right? Consumption, investments, and exports. So though they'll contribute incrementally, I think, but for the first time, actually, we would see all the three pillars contributing, and that will make the growth rate or recovery path for India much more sustainable. So on consumption, overall household consumption, we expect, I think India, the whole demographic dividend, I think there's still a long way for that to play out. The whole cohort of the Gen Z and the millennials is now exposed to a lot of new brands, and with the internet penetration driving, we've seen the consumption levels and the patterns for the new generation is totally changing towards more premium products, more branded products, and more towards discretionary consumption. So if you look at overall household spending, discretionary consumption used to be around 15% in 2005, which is currently around 24%. That is likely to go up to 40%. So the spend will be more toward discretionary items. And then we've seen that globally, when the per capita income goes above $2,000, the demand for discretionary items starts to go up. And as a result, you will see sectors like retailing, grocery, foodware, apparel, all these sectors or packaged foods should see a very strong growth rates in the coming decade. Investments also, after a long time, we are seeing that the real estate sector, which was kind of in the downturn since 2014 onwards, is seeing a revival, again, driven by the affordability gap, which was there, is now looking very, very good. It's the best what we see in the last 20 years on the back of the property prices remaining stable and income levels have gone up. And overall interest rates are also the lowest in the last 13, 15 years. And we've seen the uptick in the property market in the last few quarters. Overall inventory levels have gone down. So we think the overall property sector market is also in a kind of a new cycle. And that would also help a lot of other ancillary sectors which are dependent on the property sector do well. Within investments, the whole private sector capex has been a big drag for the economy. But I think there are enablers in place now for the private sector capex to pick up. Corporate India has delevered significantly in the last few years, especially during COVID times. We have seen that if you look at the overall debt equity ratio, which used to be around 1.1 or so pre-COVID, is now around 0.7. So corporate balance sheets are in a healthy position to further invest And many companies are now starting to talk about their capex guidance plans, especially in sectors like metals, utilities, chemicals, and in the consumer sector. And while it is still early days and capacity utilization levels are still low, as Kaustubh mentioned, but there are clear signs that the capex cycle is likely to pick up in the next 2 to 3 years. And we've seen that whenever the capex cycle, when the investment to GDP picks up, okay, that gives a lot of boost to various sectors and companies, and overall corporate profit to GDP also starts to pick up. So here in this chart, you can see that the whole investment to GDP had collapsed from 2013, right, till 2021. That should slowly start to pick up. And as that happens, okay, you should see overall profitability, corporate profitability also will start to improve. And again, the drivers for investment cycle to pick up are not only this thing, but also the whole, the PLI scheme, which has been introduced by the government, the cut in the corporate tax rate, the lower interest rate regime, the good supporting macro, stable rupee, all these factors will lead, I think, for promoters, not only domestic, but a lot of foreign companies to really set up manufacturing base in India, not only cater to the domestic market, but also to the global market. And exports have done well last year on the back of strong recovery in the developed markets. And I think that will continue to do well. I think we've seen that India's overall IT exports have been very strong. The whole PMI scheme, which has been launched towards, is not only to give size and scale, okay, for Indian companies to be able to cater to the domestic market, but also to the export market. And the whole China Plus One policy, which has been now adopted by the global supply chain, especially after COVID, I think that is likely to benefit Indian companies, especially in the textiles, in the chemicals, and in the pharmaceutical space. And we think the exports will continue to see a fairly robust growth, also supported by fairly good demand from the US. And India's US contributes more than 20% of total India's exports. So I think with all these three pillars being in place, I think we are in a place where I think the recovery, what we're seeing in the economy, will be slow and steady, but clearly it's going to be much more longer lasting than what we have seen in the past. And one of the key, COVID has driven certain key shifts in the landscape, I think, which we think are beneficial for India. Clearly, the whole acceleration towards digitization, what we've seen, adoption of global companies to move towards digital, towards online, IT spend move towards the cloud platform. As a result, we've seen Indian IT companies have been in the best kind of outlook in many years. And that outlook is not likely to be for 1 or 2 years, but it looks to be at least for the next 3 to 5 years. And that's really because India, if you look at this year, the IT sector alone is likely to recruit around 4.5 lakh new people, which is to be around, the run rate is to be just about 2 lakhs, 2.5 lakhs per year. So, and that is likely to continue for the next few years. So huge amount of employment generation, which is likely to happen, and with increasing pay scales, and that money is likely to be spent. With this huge money coming into the new graduates, that money is going to be spent on, say, housing, in terms of consumption, and so that's another that's one of the big defining trends. Okay, what we see post COVID. Secondly, is many companies globally are trying to diversify from China. Okay, hence many Indian companies are likely to see a big benefit coming out of that, especially in sectors like chemical, pharmaceutical, as I talked about earlier. And this trend is not going to be like a 1 year; it's going to be long term, because India's share of global economy for some of these sectors is still very small, and there's enough market share they can continue to gain going forward. And another big change, which is, I think, the biggest, I would say, defining, is the whole boost up to the startup ecosystem. And the India startup ecosystem was always there, but it was very small. But post-COVID, we have seen that the consumer patterns and tastes have changed dramatically. A lot of things have moved online. The digital penetration has increased significantly. And we're seeing adoption across not only shopping, but entertainment, education, healthcare. And that has led to a lot of bootstrap to the Indian startup ecosystem. And we've seen huge amount of money coming into this space, and which is not only creating new jobs and providing employment, but it is also providing the entrepreneurial spirit. Now, anybody in India can actually, a young engineer or a young graduate can have a dream and can think about a big idea, and he can have funding readily available. Overall capital flows were very strong. FDI continues to remain very strong on the back of, as I said, a lot of money moving into the tech sector, and that will continue. India's inclusion in the global bond index is also probably likely happen this year, and you could see that changes in the tax system being done in this budget, which would mean almost like $40 billion of inflows over the next couple of years, and continuous flow of money thereafter, and which is also going to strengthen the overall bond market and also ensure that the interest rates remain fairly in the narrow range. Policy rates, while we expect policy rates to go up, but overall, as Sunaina mentioned, the policy environment should remain fairly accommodative. Oil prices is the only risk which we see, but we think oil prices should remain around $80 or so. And until, even if oil prices go to around 100, we don't see that should be a significant reason to worry on the CAD front. And as a result, I think overall corporate profit to GDP ratio, which has consistently fallen in the last 6 years, we see that starting to mean revert. If you look at the downturn has been caused by sectors like telecom, PSU banks, and a lot of the cyclical sectors. All these sectors are now likely to show an improvement. Telecom has already turned around. Metals have shown very strong profits. Capital goods and other sectors are also likely to improve. And that is going to drive the profit growth going forward. Also, other sectors like technology, private sector, banks, and other consumer NBFCs have always shown a very steady growth. So we are at a cusp where we see the overall earnings growth starting to improve. And this year, obviously, will be a very strong growth of around 37% because of the low base. But I think we would see the growth even beyond that to be around 15% kind of a trajectory, which is slightly higher than the growth what we've seen, the long-term average, which is around 12%. And again, this growth will be driven, the earnings growth over the next 2 years will be driven by the biggest contributors will be the financial sector. The banking sector will see a strong growth on the back of lower credit growth, credit cost, the recovery in credit growth. Energy sector is also likely to do well. I mean, this includes Reliance over here. IT sector will show a steady growth. Materials are also likely to do well. Discretionary consumption again is also be stronger as we see overall mobility starts to pick up and normalcy comes in post-COVID. So there are multiple sectors which will drive this growth, and that gives a more confidence and sustainability of this growth going forward. And if you look at India's CAGR growth rate over the next 2 years, it will be again one of the highest amongst all the emerging markets, which will ensure that India continues to outperform and continues to get a good share of the overall emerging market inflows. Overall valuations are slightly on the higher side, but the recent correction in the market and the earnings growth makes the valuations only slightly above the long-term average. But we think the overall valuations will remain expensive because A, growth outlook is strong, and the policy environment interest rates would continue to remain lower. The mid-cap and small caps have seen a good rally. So the valuations there are also slightly kind of on the higher side. But the growth rate in the mid-cap and small-cap earnings growth can be slightly better as the domestic economy recovers. So they can continue to do well despite the valuations on the slightly higher side. Overall, on the flows side, I think we would say that last year, emerging market, we saw outflows from emerging markets, on the back of dollar strength, which was there. This year also, I think while DXY will remain slightly elevated, and emerging markets might not see very large growth. But last year also, if you saw, India still received a good amount of inflows. And looking at the India's growth differential, we think India will still continue to see FII flows even in this calendar year. So probably not as high as we saw in 2020. And if you look at India's weightage in the emerging market funds, global funds, traditionally India has seen in the range of around as high as around 4 to 5%. Current weightage is somewhere around as low as 1.1%. So there is enough room for global funds or emerging markets funds to increase their India weightage, looking at the better growth differential in India. And that will ensure that India continues to get relatively better flows amongst the emerging markets. And domestic flows also have been very strong. Last year, we've seen the domestic retail participation was the key reason why the markets did well, even while FIs seen outflows. Overall retail ownership has gone up, and SIP flows into the mutual fund industry has also been steadily increasing and has reached around 11,000 crores on a monthly basis. And I think that trend, is likely to continue because the overall breadth of the market is improving now, right? A lot of retail new investors are coming into the market, and which has been reflected on the fact that the overall demat accounts in India in the last 2 years has almost doubled. And I think that is good for the health of the equity markets because the broad basing of the investor base is kind of offsetting the FI outflows. And as a result, we have seen that whenever FIs have seen large outflows, also the markets haven't really reacted too much. And that's a big structural change in the Indian markets, what we see. Overall, the IPO activity level in India has been at a record high last year, where we had 15.8 billion, almost $16 billion of new money, which was raised by almost 103 companies. And I think that the pipeline of also new companies coming to the market is still fairly large. And there are all these new age companies which are coming to the market, the new age technology companies, which have been able to make successful IPOs. A year back, one would have thought that India market is still not ripe for some of these new age technology companies to come in. But I think Indian market seems to have matured, and there are we've seen a lot of unicorns now coming in, especially in the private space. We've seen large funding coming in, and many companies are now looking forward to tapping into the doors and getting listed. There's a wide list of companies which are there, which would also broaden the market in terms of some of these new age technology companies, which you could see coming in even in this calendar year. Overall, if you look at compare next year vis-a-vis last year, how do we look at? So on global demand, I think while it moderates down compared to last year where we saw a strong rebound, but it will still be fairly decent. Overall, US dollar, okay, which was kind of weakening, we should see US dollar kind of moderating down. Exports for India, actually, if you look at exports were very strong, that will continue to remain fairly strong. Private sector capex, which has been weak, we expect that to pick up slowly. Consumption was weak last year. I think that should slowly start to pick up, especially discretionary consumption start to pick up. And while inflation and all these things which were high global, that should start to moderate down. So on balance, I think in this year, while there are concerns about interest rates going up and growth slowing down a bit, but things should be fairly fine. Again, the key question which investors ask is, what is the market peaked out, right? With P multiples where there are. So if you compare vis-a-vis 2008 and now and look at it, see in 2008, when the market peaked out, we had almost 3 years prior to that, the GDP growth was very strong, around 9% or so. Whereas currently we are, if in the last 3 year GDP growth is just about 2%. So we are coming in from a much lower base, right? And that is also reflected in the fact that the corporate profit to GDP ratio is around 2.3% compared to around 7.8%. There is enough room for corporate profits and growth to really reflate from here. And that will mean that the earnings growth could be much stronger in the coming years. So and overall interest rates are also, while rates are going to go up, but they're still much lower than what they were at around 8%, okay, when the markets picked up. So I think there is enough room for the markets to really move up from here before we start worrying about when the markets have peaked out. So overall, to summarize, I think in the market, I'd say that I think India is at a cusp of a new growth cycle, both in terms of GDP growth, and again, driven by all the three pillars of consumption, investments, and exports. Though nothing will be very strong on what we've seen in the earlier stronger growth, but I think each one of them will contribute. Corporate earnings CAGR are likely to grow at around 15% over the next 3 years, which is much higher than the long-term average and much better than what we've seen in the last 5 years. And overall, I think the overall easy money which was there, right, easy liquidity conditions which we saw last year, okay, that will give away. That means the market will slightly be more discerning, right, and it will be more stock-specific rally, okay, which we will see in the market going forward. And the valuation multiples overall will still continue to remain elevated because of the stronger growth. Market returns in the shorter term would probably be moderate because markets have rallied, but long-term returns still look fairly good. If you take a 3-year view, we think the earnings growth, market returns could be probably a tad lower than the earnings growth as the valuations kind of moderate down a bit. But still, I think equities still offer the best risk reward compared to any other asset class. And as a result, we would advise that investors should continue to maintain their target allocation to equities and continue to do that. Use any correction in the market should be as an opportunity to add equity exposure. And the breadth of the market will also continue to improve, and that will ensure that the money managers continue to generate alpha as what we have seen last year. And overall, I think India's GDP growth can touch around $5 trillion over the next 5 to 6 years. And the market cap can actually go higher as we see larger participation of the formalization of the economy happens, larger companies getting listed, and there are new companies which are getting listed. So India's market cap can actually surpass GDP and reach $5 to $6 trillion over the next 5 to 6 years. And the key themes which we would of interest going forward could be the banking and financial services sector. We think will do well. Again, especially the large private banks, the valuations are also fairly reasonable, and with growth coming back and credit costs coming down, I think the sector should do well. Cyclical revival in real estate, as we talked about, I think all sectors linked to real estate should do well. Consumer discretionary sector, especially the low ticket consumer discretionary, retail, consumer durables, will drive as the per capita income goes up and move from unorganized to organized. And the rise of domestic manufacturing, I think after a long time, you will see that play out, taking benefit of all the PLI schemes and the stronger corporate balance sheet. And the whole digital transformation, what we are seeing play out globally and also in India, that will continue to benefit the Indian IT sector. So these are the 3 of the 4 themes which will continue to drive our investment thesis in the next few years. And finally, the risks, while risk will always be there, the key risks remain, again, expected inflation. Okay, if it is last longer than expected, okay, that could see more accelerated rate hikes going forward. That remains a risk. Larger than expected slowdown in China can be another risk, which I would say. And oil, okay, while oil is still around this thing, but any supply side constraint, increase in oil prices above 100 can be bad news for Indian macros. And on the domestic side, I think not much. I think while virus is a risk, but I don't think that's really going to be much of a challenge. Okay, government policies, I don't think there should be any change. I mean, we have elections in UP this year. So we'll see. But I think the government still looks like it will be on its path towards growth and should not really falter in terms of its whole policy framework, what it has already put in place. And finally, in terms of our offerings, as I said, the larger allocation, I think, should continue with a diversified fund. because we're seeing large cap, mid cap, and small cap. The risk reward is fairly well balanced across all that space. So large allocation should be a diversified fund, followed by large cap. Continue allocation towards, say, a mid cap side, because as domestic economy does well, mid caps will continue to do well. And amongst the thematics, okay, what we are advising is the banking and financial services sector fund, the Digital India Fund to play the whole digital theme, and the Gen Next Fund, okay, which is a play on the overall consumption. So, so that's it. I think in summary, I would say that this is a time, I think what I'm seeing, the big transformation which is happening in the country, it will happen slow and steadily, but it is going to touch many lives. The whole digital revolution, what we are seeing, the startup ecosystem is going to create a very totally different kind of a buoyancy in the Indian economy, and which will continue to drive profit growth and take the markets higher from here. Yeah, so that's it. I think, Amrita, we can
sure. We can
go
into for Q&A. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Mahesh, for sharing a perspective on the equity market. We will now open for Q&A, and we already have some questions that have come in. So I'm going to read them out. Okay.
Discuss the presentation.
Sorry. Yeah.
Mahesh,
you can stop sharing the presentation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So before I begin the Q&A section, just to repeat, you can type in your questions and mention the publication name and your name and who the question is for. That would help, or we can just throw in the question to our speakers. Okay, the first one is coming from Bhargav Trivedi from Sandesh. Hi, Bhargav. I would like to know about your view on Fed rate hikes and market performance, as we have seen between 2003 to 2007. Despite more than 12 rate hikes, markets performed. We experienced secular bull run between 2016 and 2019 too. Between 2016 and 2019 too, we witnessed same thing. What about this time? So who wants to go for this?
Yeah, so I'll take that.
Sure.
So I think, see, there is no doubt. See, normally what happens is that when there's growth slowing down, economic crisis, the Fed cuts rates, and then there's an economic recovery which is there, right? And slowly you start to really normalize the whole trade. And while the normalization happens, right, the central banks are still behind the curve, right? And growth continues to improve. And that's what we saw in that period, right? 2003 to 2007, global growth continued to improve. Rates also went up, but the markets are more driven by, at least in the initial period, by the growth, because that has a larger impact on overall earnings. The increase in interest rates, while they happen, but the top line growth is stronger, the impact of that is much stronger on the bottom line. So I think while the normalization happens, I think unless the rates become so restrictive that they start to impact growth, right? And I think the markets continue to do well in that period. And that's what I think we are also currently in a phase where the Fed is in its normalization path. You will see interest rates go up, but they will not really do anything to really harm the growth or restrict it significantly. It is still some time away, okay, where rates reach a level where they start to really hurt. So I think given that scenario, I think this same normalization path, what we see currently by the Fed and also domestically by the RBI, I think that should not really impact the markets. There is always some kind of a course correction, okay, when the first rate happens, the market tends to react to it, but then it again bounces back on the back of the overall trajectory of growth.
Thank you, Mahesh. The next question is from Suresh Angan from Hindu Business Line. Hi, Suresh. Corporates have used the cash generation to reduce debt rather than enhancing capacity. Is it a signal that they are not as bullish as investors are? Also, government fiscal position is not that good, will they be able to drive growth?
Wait.
Kaushal, you want to take that?
Yeah, yes, Mahesh. So Suresh, look, it's a valid observation that corporates of late, despite better profitability, they are not basically they're using their cash or internal accrual to fund their capex. Now, which is the essence in of my one of the slide, if you remember, that for any cycle, corporate cycle, and ideally capex, you need to lever up. Now that leverage piece has two parts. One is ability to lever up, and then there has to be a willingness to lever up. Now ability part is what we have addressed in last 5 years. How we have kept real rates, now they are in deep into negative territory. Liquidity has been infused, which was generally restrictive into the prior era. Then to some extent there is clarity in terms of policy making. Corporate taxes have been reduced. PLI, schemes like PLI. So there is a reasonable incentive. So overall the structure is already ready. And most important thing, both the banking balance sheet and the corporate balance sheets, they are in much better shape than any time in last, I would say, post 2008. So in last 15 years, corporate balance sheet, they are much better, which is more of an indication of ability. Now, what your question specifically, I think, is pondering on a point is that why are corporates not levering it up? Because unless they start levering it up, the magic of both financial leverage and operating leverage, which starts accruing in your balance sheets, it's not visible. So I would say there are from the willingness, one is more of a softer point, and one which is a hard fact. Hard fact is that capacity utilization, they are still at a lower level. So what we are seeing is a lot of nominal growth in the corporate side, but when you deflate it with the nominal WPI numbers or CPI numbers, then the growth is still a lot more muted. It is better than last year, but it is muted than what it used to be in the previous capex cycle. Now, under the softer aspect of it, which is where I think the bigger problem of capex cycle this time around is that animal splits, because of continuous drawdown they saw in 2008, 2011, 2013, then 2015. Generally the entrepreneurship skill of, or which is what we know as an animal split, it has taken a hard beating, both again from a lender perspective and a borrower perspective. From a borrower perspective, because today the borrowers are whenever they are coming out with results, the one key highlight in the result is that what is the debt equity ratio, how much debt they are paying off, which is what equity markets are generally celebrating, that the companies are not levering up, they are paying it off, which means they are in much better shape. So there is an incentive, soft incentive, that these borrowers have got. If their balance sheets are cleaner and meaner, then they are getting better valuation compared to the companies which are still into this operative and, or rather in financial leverage. The second part is from the lender's perspective. Now, if you see previous capex cycle in India, which was in 2006 to 2013, or rather 2012, there were mostly PSU banks and two large private banks who were funding that capex. Now, post 2012, because large part of PSU banks was pushed into PCA category longer than what probably was originally envisaged, and even the couple of corporate banks who were funding this corporate cycle, they have found that the new love for them is retail piece. Now, as a matter of fact, just to give you a color, since 2015, the outstanding corporate credit in India at a banking level is at same level, which means that corporate credit is not growing since 2015. So the bankers now also, they are more focused on risk mitigations, they are more focused on cleaning their books, they are more focused on making books very granular, so that if there is a new cycle or new shocks comes in, the impact on their profitability and the book is a lot lower. Then there are a lot of regulations which have come in, which at margin are disincentivizing that you start taking any big risk. So all these reasons, in our view, this part is somewhat lesser appreciated, which is the softer part, but this is what holding corporates to kickstart new capex cycle through a leverage. And it's true not only for India, it's a global. You pick up US, you pick up Europe, you pick up most of the advanced economies, everywhere the capex cycle has slowed, everywhere the banking balance sheet exposure to corporate credit has slowed secularly, because everywhere post 2008 and 2011 and 13, lot of regulations have come in so as to make sure that the leverage part is kept in check. The second part, which I think you talk about, is more on the fiscal front. You are right that today the fiscal position is a lot more stretched, but good thing is that into the COVID only, government has bought, or they have given a timeline to the market that they have moved from the fiscal run rate, which used to be more like 3 to 3.5 into the COVID for next 5 year, rather 1 and 2 year. Now it's true that up till now, the actual spending is absolutely negligible or rather muted. Okay, but because they have a timeline for 5 years and they have taken this path and they have communicated to the markets, and markets are more or less they are agreed to it, that the fiscal India moves from 3.5 to average 5.5 for 5 years. They have reasonable fiscal space for another 3-4 years to push the capex. Now it is hopeful that next 3-4 years, both consumption and the capex peaks will start moving up. And at that time, even if government is withdrawing from this fiscal profligacy from 5.5 to more like 3.5, which was the original path before COVID, they will still have a very reasonable, about closer to, you can say on an average, 10% of GDP by that time government would end up spending to support economy. So that's the argument on the fiscal part, that they are stressed, but it is because it's well communicated, and that's the seen again at a global policy level. Now, only thing is that in year 2020 and 2021, central bankers, they were facilitating the fiscal slippage by actively intervening in the market. So fiscal is the reason why globally the growth has come back, but monetary policy was facilitating it, and which is why we think that this unwind in monetary policy has to be in very calibrated and telegraphed manner, because the fiscal path has been bought for next 5 years, which means that for next 5 years, monetary policy need to be accommodative, or rather incrementally next 3 years, monetary policy need to be accommodative at margin than what it used to be pre-pandemic, to support the fiscal growth or to support the fiscal roadmap that government has embarked itself on.
All right. Thank you so much, Kaustav. Our next question, we have 2 questions for Satya Suntanam from the Mint. Okay, your view on passive investing, I think Bala sir can take this. There is a school of thought that rotation is what drives the markets going ahead. Will investor be better off holding a diversified index fund?
Yeah, I think Satya, the way I see happening is, as Mahesh presented in his slide, if you look at last year, 2021, the sector that outperformed where the outperformance, some of the sectors are significantly higher than index itself. I think I saw the slide, like digital sector has done far exceedingly well than the index fund. And therefore, the sectoral rotation being there, I think that's going to be the theme. Definitely the diversified flexi cap kind of fund would attempt to actually have larger ownership in some of the sectors, will always be high. Therefore, the outperformance that could come from the over the index would be relatively higher in terms of probability. Even I was looking at the 21 number itself. In our own case, 55% of the funds are beaten the benchmark by average from 2 to 2.5% minimum. With respect to Sensex, if I take the Sensex, I'm taking the Nifty as the 2.5% the outperformance. If it is the Sensex, the outperformance is almost range of about 5%. Therefore, the market, once it becomes a broad-based market, I think index-based investing will, of course, help you participate in the market, but not necessarily outperform. That's something which I just want to highlight, that I think the index outperformance is actually something with Endeavor is there with most of the active managers, which probably if you're looking at the 10-year of bull market and the larger participants coming from the market, breadth in the market widening, then probability of money managers beating the benchmark will be high. Even globally, I'm told, with the significant growth in ETF in US market, now they are getting worried, too much of money going to the ETF, and then therefore that will actually lead to a disruption in the valuation. then naturally active money managers will start looking at companies at a different angle. Therefore, there's high probability they will start come back. Therefore, there's something which in my own belief is I think we have to keep this in mind.
All right,
And you
thank
also have a second question. Fixed income, a lot of target maturity funds are said to be launched with the maturity of 4 to 5 years. Sunana, you want to take this question or should I answer?
No, so Bala sir, there are a lot of funds that are looking at, say, target maturity of 4 to 5 years. Currently, what we're looking at when you're looking at where an investor should actually come in is since the yield curve is extremely steep and the rate hikes are already quite priced in, investors should actually look to match their investment horizon with the targeted investment horizon or the duration that is run by the fund. And that will actually enable the investor to benefit from the steepness and the carry that is there in the curves right now. Having said that, because the curves are so steep, and there is fair amount of carry that is already baked in as a result with normalization coming, because of the steep carry that is there, the potential loss due to duration or normalization is actually less because of the carry. We have seen when we're looking at the curves, it's very steep till about 4 or 5 years. Post that, then actually, it's actually very flat, which is why, you will see for those investors who are looking at very long term, and when I say very long term, it's actually 4 to 5 years, that's when, a target maturity or maybe a roll down maturity, where you invest in at the inception of the fund, and if you're launching it now, looking at a 4 to 5 years, so that you benefit from that carry, from that roll down, that is actually something that maybe investors could look at. But at the end of the day, investors should try to match their investment horizon with the duration that the fund is running for their target fund, and that's when they'll be able to benefit from the steep yield curve.
Just to add to what Sunana is saying, we launched this fund with a 4 to 5 year target maturity. We collected the first time we collected about 900 crores. Today the fund size is crossed about 3,000 crores, and we continue to see a flow purely on the basis of the concept which Sunana explained. Secondly, there is a set of people who are conservative in nature, including corporate treasuries. One. Second is a large pool of family office and HNIs. Do not want to take too much of risk on, say, equity, or maybe they already exposed to equity, but do not want to have incremental exposure. At the same time, do not want to take the risk of duration and rising interest rate scenario, but want to have predictable return purely on the basis of the targeted maturity that each fund targets. That is where I see some kind of inflows. Rather, the recognition is coming in that fund, this kind of funds will be more suitable in the current market trend. I think we at Aditya Birla Mutual Fund have already planned for a series of such plans in order to ensure differentiated product opportunities for the investors.
All right. Thank you so much, Bala sir and Sunana, for answering that. Okay, so next question is from Ashish Rukhaya from Business Today. The question is for Bala sir. Recent filings with SEBI for new schemes show that most fund houses are launching thematic ETFs and fund of funds aimed at overseas investments, since they are benchmarked to global indices. Going ahead, do you think the share of overseas investments by MFs will register a rise much higher than the historical averages? Also, what do you attribute this trend to?
I think there is an increased popularity coming for investing in global market, thanks to the awareness going up and about launching of international funds, investing in international equity market, and that's something is I see as a recent trend change, as we have seen in the case of investing in Indian equity, where we have seen a significant rise. So fund houses like us have been actually undertaking both on launching ETF passive product in India to give complementary product to the existing actively managed funds. While doing that, also give a variety of choices to invest in global markets, such as NASDAQ ETF, which we started some time back. I think such kind of funds are coming in, even by the other industry players, to provide choices to investors who actually look at diversifying the portfolio beyond the border. So that is where I think I see these funds are coming in. Clearly, I think from a longer term point of view, if there's an opportunity in certain sectors or certain countries that can potentially add to the existing portfolio that the Indian investors have got, definitely is an opportunity that as a mutual fund, having got the flexibility and understanding of launching a product, not also have the proper tie-up or investing in such kind of money that is being raised to invest in overseas market. That's something you are doing it. But investors' point of view, I always believe that most of the Indian investors who are not exposed to Indian mutual fund space, first have to expose themselves, investing in Indian equity space and in debt phase through the mutual fund schemes. Then those who are fully reasonably exposed can look at diversifying incremental of asset allocation through the offshore assets. That's the way I see it.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Ruchit Purohit from Financial Express. I think Mahesh can take this question. We saw around $6 billion equity outflows by FPIs in H2 calendar year 21. However, we are now seeing a trend reversal since the beginning of January. What are the key reasons for the reversal in trend, and will the inflows sustain throughout the calendar year? Mahesh?
Yeah. No, so you are right. I think last year, I think in the end of the last calendar year, we saw a large amount of outflows. Again, that was because of huge outflow from emerging market funds. Right? You've seen that slide which I showed earlier. Emerging markets saw large outflows on the back of US dollar strength, what we were seeing. And India also saw a part of that outflows. What we're seeing early, I mean, it's still too early to really talk about this calendar year, right? Because the FIs are by and large absent. I think most of the FIs will come into the market in the next week, right? The hedge funds and others. And normally what we see is the initial part of the half, okay, you see new fresh allocation coming in, okay, and that money comes in. But by and large, if you look at this calendar year, I would say that overall inflows into emerging markets might still be a bit muted on the back of the fact that we're seeing that dollar, while strength will continue at least for the first half of this calendar year on the back of rise in US interest rates. And as a result of that, I think the flows will be muted. India might still continue to get a larger share, I think, of the flows here, because India's growth, if you look at compared to the emerging markets, is much superior. And we showed that in the earlier slide, right? So that should continue to see flows over here. And also India's weightage in the emerging market funds is also at a kind of a low level compared to the historical levels. Right? It's just about 1% overweight, whereas historically it has been up to 4 to 5% also overweight. So there is room to increase that. So I would say that for this full calendar year, you might see still positive flows, but not very strong flows, considering the fact that overall flows into emerging markets might not be that great.
Okay, thanks, Mahesh. The next question is also for Mahesh. This is from Shujit Nair from Informist. Hi, Shujit. How are you viewing sectors like travel, tourism, hotel, and aviation, since we are seeing new COVID variants coming up? Are you staying away from these sectors, or is this the right time to invest?
So I think all these sectors which were impacted because of COVID, especially tourism, hospitality, entertainment, are still yet to recover fully. But I think one thing is very clear, that I think people are the new Omicron variant, what we are seeing, while the number of cases are increasing, as I mentioned, we are not seeing too much of increasing hospitalization rates. So yeah, it might lead to a slight delay in the recovery, what we would have expected in these sectors. But really, I think these sectors will come back with a binge. Okay, there'll be a revenge spend which will be there. So this calendar, I would expect some of these sectors really to do well, and barring the initial 1 or 2 months, okay, when we see some hiccups over there, and should be a year where some of all these sectors should come back with very strongly in terms of consumers going out and spending over there. So given that, I think, yeah, I mean, it's a good time to look at some of these sectors, okay, when they're still depressed and they're not still really operating at their full potential. But I think as we progress forward in this calendar year, you will see normalization pretty fast, and all these sectors, retail, entertainment, and this thing should bounce back.
All right, so I think we have answered all the queries that had come in, at least over here. We have some which have come on messages, which we can, take up separately. If there are no other questions, I think we can close the session for today. And do reach out to us if you have any further queries, any other details required. You need to connect with any of our spokespersons. We'll happy to, arrange a call, a meeting, whatever works best for you all. Thank you so much, our speakers and all our attendees, for taking out time for this. Have a lovely day ahead, and hope to see you all soon, very soon.
Also, hopefully, so Amrita, you organize the next press meeting.
Yes, in a banquet where we can meet everybody. It's been a while. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Amrita.
Thanks. Bye.